Welcome back to another stint of reading Falling from Grace. We know that in our previous reading session, Kip had spent a bit of time at Ted's house while he was waiting for Annie and Grace's dad to come for his backpack that he had found. And we got to know, I guess, a little bit more about Ted and the type of person that he might be based on some of the things that he had at his house. We also know that Kip felt a little bit worried about leaving his house, almost feeling that Ted might have been abusive or angry towards him. So we also start to get a bit of a sense of, Ted, but also Kip as well. The fact that, he really is there to try to give back that backpack, and he seems to be getting a little bit swayed by this man called Ted. We now start again with Kip and we continue reading. Last time, however, we found out that Annie had ran all the way back home and we don't know where she ended up. So hopefully we'll find out in the next few pages. All right, let's make a start. Kip. The guy on the beach was rummaging through the backpack, taking everything out. Do you want me to show you where I think I saw them? I said. He looked up. What? You saw them? Where? He was such a nervy guy. I told you before, I saw some kids up the beach when the tide was a bit further out, around from the point. It might have been them. Okay, he said, pushing out his forehead with his hand. Then he looked at me as if he had only just noticed I was there. Thank you, he breathed out. Yes, that would be good. But hang on. Point Nepean will be closed now. How can we get around? We can go over the top, I said, pointing to the cliff. Then I had to sit down. I almost fell down. Are you okay? The guy asked. I stood up, wobbling like a newborn calf. I didn't answer him because I had this sudden feeling that I was going to be sick. I took a deep breath of cold, salty air and felt a bit better. He went to the cliff at the end of the beach. The keep out sign loomed over us, but what the hell? We needed to get around. So remember, guys, again, we have this idea of these keep out signs. We have the danger, unstable cliffs, and we keep coming back to this. So this, it also starts to become a theme. It's that foreshadowing. It's that idea that, these are trying to keep them out, yet all the characters are doing the complete opposite of that. We climbed over the rocks. When the waves washed right up to us, we climbed up the side of the cliff, along the top and down to the beach on the other side. Tide's right in, the guy said as he stepped onto the sand. He looked worried. Then I forgot that I hadn't introduced myself. My name's Kip, I told him, and I held out my hand, like my dad had taught me to do when I met someone. He looked at my hand. He shook it as if he didn't want to. Andrew, he said slowly, when did you see them? I looked at my watch. The glass had fogged up. The numbers were hard to make out. I couldn't remember what time I'd left home. I think my watch said 5:42. Why was it so dark? Why had day ended in the afternoon? I don't know, I told him. I saw them before, but I had to stop because I felt sick again. We were playing a game, he said, as if this might help me to tell him something. A tracking game at Point Nepean. They were hiding. They must have got lost. We'd reached the old quarantine station. The cliffs had become small dunes, and behind the scrub and grasses, I'd never been here before. It was different from the rest of the bay. It seemed fuller, swollen. The silver green water was swirling around at all angles. I'll go along the dunes and you stay on the beach, Andrew said. He stopped. Are you sure you're okay? I nodded. I called out, Grace! Annie! Andrew shouted out to me. How do you know my daughter's names? I stopped. He was standing in the grasses. You said their names before, I told him, on the phone. Grace and Annie? You've got a good memory. He didn't say that as if it were a compliment. He was looking at my hands, my shirt with the blood on it. This mark, this blood, I said, trying to make things better. A man cut his foot and I helped him. Andrew looked at me. I didn't look back. Right, he said. Okay. So, what do we notice here? Okay, so we've got a young boy holding a backpack of two girls that have gone missing. We've got a dad who comes to find him. The boy, has a penguin in his backpack. He's got blood on his face, and he's woozy, and he's falling over, and he's sitting down, and he appears to not be very well. So this idea that, the dad starts to become suspicious of Kip, it sort of tells you he's putting all these things together. And so we can start to maybe predict what Andrew, the dad, might think about Kip, or what he thinks Kip might have done. I felt as if I'd said the wrong thing. Up ahead, through the rain, I saw a four-wheel drive. It was a security car parked at the end of a track. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. A man got out as we came closer. "This guy's probably picked them up," Andrew said, sounding relieved. "Have you seen two girls?" he asked when we reached the car. The man glared at us. He was probably angry that he had to get out of his nice warm car and into the rain that was falling in a steady rhythm. I noticed a gun and handcuffs hanging over his stomach. He shook his head. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "This is government property." I waved my arm in the direction we'd come from. "We came from up the beach," I told him. "Yeah," he snapped. "I saw you hanging around here earlier." Andrew turned his head quickly to me. "Called out to you to get off the land. You're lucky the police haven't come to arrest you. This is a property of Defense Department." Did he think we were some sort of terrorists? "I'm sorry," said Andrew. "Let me explain what's happened. I knew the gates would be closed. I think my daughters are lost here." He stopped. "They're only young. They're only children." "I don't know about any children. I'm ordering you off this land. Go back to the track and leave the park immediately. This beach is closed. Don't ever come here again." He spoke to us as if we were naughty school kids. "Will anyone be at the visitor centre? I want to know if they've been taken out of the park," said Andrew. The security guard relaxed a bit, or maybe he just wanted to get rid of us and looked out of the rain before we could ask him to help out. "I'd say that someone driving the transport would have picked up your kids. They're pretty careful about getting everyone out by closing. They're probably been dropped home by now. I'd advise you to get on your way as well. It's a very high tide. You'll need to go back on the track. It's about 100 yards up." Andrew walked towards the track. I followed. The sand gave way under my feet. "We'll go to the visitor centre and see if anyone's there," he said. He rang his wife on the mobile phone to check if they had come home. When he'd finished, he shut the phone and turned to me. "Were you around here earlier?" he asked. "No." "The security guard said that he saw you." "Ah, I was only a little way around the point. We'd almost reached the old cattle jetty when I saw something at the water's edge. I thought it was a towel on the wet sand, a wave washing over it. I went over and picked it up. It was heavy, dripping, a piece of clothing. It was a pair of jeans, with one leg completely ripped up the side. Andrew grabbed them from me, and his face crumpled up. "These are Grace's jeans," he cried out. I could see a dark streak down the torn side. I didn't want to say anything to Andrew, but he knew too. He knew what it was, by the way he was looking at it. It was blood. Bum, bum, bum. So, we'll stop here. Think about it for a moment. Predicting. We now find a pair of jeans on the beach. We know that there's a bit of blood on them. So now you should be in your mind starting to formulate some predictions about what you think might have happened, whether it be to Grace or whoever you think that the jeans might belong to. So you can start to sort of put two and two together about what you think might happen next. All right, let's keep going. We're now back to Annie. "I stood on the porch until Mum and Simon came home. Mum slammed the car door as I ran to the garage. "Annie, thank God!" She rushed over to me. "Where were you? Dad phoned me. I was just getting fish and chips for dinner." She spoke too quickly. "I couldn't find Dad. I didn't know where he was." "I'd better call him back and tell him you're here. How did you lose the backpack? Where's Grace? Is she inside?" Simon was getting out of the car. She handed him the phone and held the warm parcel. I could smell salt. "Quick, phone Dad and tell him they're okay," she told him. "Mum," I said loudly, then more quietly. "Mum, Grace isn't here." She turned around quickly. "What?" "Grace is still back there." I pointed in the direction of the rain and the dark at Point Nepean. Mum's voice got higher. She dropped the fish and chips on the garage floor. They fell with a thump. "Is she all right? Why did you leave her?" She held my shoulders, almost shaking me. Annie, what happened? Where's Grace? She found a penguin, and we had to rescue it. Then she got stuck on the rocks in the cliff. We didn't know where Dad was. A storm came. I ran all the way home. I could feel my voice trembling. I pushed my dripping hair off my face, wiped my eye. Mum grabbed the phone from Simon. We've got Annie, she said, but not Grace. All right. Oh, the slides are getting a little bit askew, but that's all right. We can still read. Kip. Andrew was on his mobile, calling the police. He was telling them that his daughter was lost and that I was there with him. He looked over at me and then I heard him say, about 17? I'm not 17, I told him. I'm 14. But he'd turned his back. I didn't know whether to hang around or head off home. The tide was so far in now that it would be impossible to get back the beach way. I decided to take the road. I started off, but I felt so sick. I threw up on the sand. Andrew came over. I threw up, I said, wiping my face on my sleeve. I think I need to go home. You need to wait here till the police come, he told me. We stood there, getting buffeted by the wind. They'll be okay, I said. They've probably found some shelter, one of the old concrete forts. The police will find them. Shut up, he told me. The rain came again, suddenly falling down in straight silver lines. I looked out toward the horizon. The bay was lifting like an ocean. Andrew led me under a tea tree in the scrub behind the beach. Will the police see us here? I asked. He didn't answer me. I didn't want to sit under the tree. I stepped out towards the old cattle jetty. Lightning turned the sky silver, and I could see big drops of rain flying at angles across the sky. There was a swell. The sand was all uneven rises and falls, like a lopsided hill going into the sea. The water swirled and rocked. It looked full to bursting. It made me feel dizzy. Was it around here that you saw them? He said, coming to stand beside me. I don't know. I had no idea. I'd completely lost my sense of direction. I thought you said you saw them. He sounded angry. It could have been them. I don't know. We better get up from the road so the police see us. A narrow track through the bush took us up to the road. Above the rain I could hear the ocean crashing on the other side of the peninsula. Andrew held the sleeve of my shirt. We sheltered in an old concrete bunker. The wind howled through the openings. Both of us were totally saturated. I felt exhausted and completely lost. After a few minutes, the police car lights appeared in the dark. Right, said the first policeman out of the car. We'll put some waterproof gear on you and you can show us where you found the jeans. They gave us each a torch and we led the police back to the spot. Then they started asking me questions. Where did you find the backpack? Floating in the water. And there was a dead animal in it? I nodded, still watching the sea. A penguin. What's that on your shirt? Lightning struck again. Hang on, I told them, swinging my torch around. I'd seen something in the water. No, you hang on, said the policeman. We've got 2 kids missing. You've already been reported loitering in this area. You stink of alcohol. Your shirt's covered in blood, and so are these jeans. 2 kids, said Andrew. Annie's okay. She's with my wife. The policeman nodded. There's your daughter. Plus, we've just got word that a young boy went missing this afternoon. I took a quick breath. The little boy. The policeman looked at me, his face dripping water. Someone fitting your description was seen in this area. I should have taken the headphones off. I should have listened to him. Do you know something about that as well? He shone the torch on me. No, I said quickly. I shook my head. They both looked at me. They knew I was lying. Police are trained to spot liars. So we're starting to now gather, some more information about Kip. He's also seen this boy and he's decided to lie about it. So we start to figure out, why would he lie about it? He was wearing headphones. Maybe he felt a bit ashamed that he didn't stop or worried that he had something to do with this. But it's obviously in a very, very tough predicament because he knows something about the girls going missing. He knows something about this boy going missing and he's at the center of all of this. Okay, so he keeps on mentioning that idea of being completely lost, that idea that he's lost, he doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know what's happening with his own life compared to what's happening here on this beach, that he just happened to be, messed up in the center of all of this, so we can start to, gather a bit of an idea of what might happen to Kip in the future, what might happen as we read on. So start to make those predictions in your head. Listen, I said. I felt like crying. This blood on my shirt is from when a guy up the beach hurt his foot. But I didn't say it as if I meant it, because somehow I knew they would think it wasn't true, as if I wasn't sure myself whether it was the truth or not. How had I got myself here, in this storm, in this state, with this blood on me? More police arrived. One guy was telling them to get torches and start looking. I heard them call the Coast Guard, and the policeman with me went over to talk to them on the phone. Stay here, he said. We'll need to call your parents. He left me for a minute. I went out onto the broken down jetty to get a look at the water again. I balanced on the posts and shone my torch. There was something out there. It was a board being tossed around, moving in and out of the light. It was chipped across the top. It was purple. I'll stop there for a moment as well. Hopefully you have made a connection. We see a purple board being tossed around in the water. When Kip, if you can remember, was back at Ted's house and he was trying to find the phone, he found it underneath a purple boogie board. Keep that in mind. I turned back to tell the police. The wind was so loud that they didn't hear what I said. I couldn't make my voice louder. I wanted to go home. I didn't want to call my parents. I didn't understand why they seemed so angry with me. The way they looked at me. But it made me feel terrible. It made me feel guilty for not helping that kid. I kept seeing his face. But why should I have felt bad? I didn't even know who he was. The waves threw the board up into the beam of torchlight. A boogie board. I was sick again. I was wet through and the wind was screaming. Wait, someone was clinging to it. It must be those girls, or did he say he'd found one? I called out. I nearly overbalanced on the rickety jetty. There's someone in the water! Annie! I yelled. Grace! But nobody heard me. Nobody at all. It was as if I had my headphones on again. Police were moving across the sand. A line of lights jostled in and out of my eyes. And then the wind and the rain and the storm were like music. And it came to me. The sky was moving. It poured down and the storm picked me up, making me part of it. And of course, I knew what I had to do. It was simple. I could save whoever was clinging to that board. I could get away from that man and the police who didn't believe me. I could swim. I had this moment of focus when everything became clear. I never, ever felt sick in the water. I'd feel better. And then they'd know that I was the old Kip, the young Kip, the Kip who was sure and knew what he was doing. I started to fall. The water hit me and my breath went out. It was stinging cold, but I didn't mind. I was away from the police and the man on the jetty, away from Ted. Now all I had to do was reach the purple boogie board. I saw silky lights over the water. I felt the strong current like a surf undertow. I knew it now. They didn't trust me. They thought I'd done something terrible, but I was going to do something fantastic. I was going to use my gift. Each time my head came out of the water, I could hear rain pelting down. I could hear shouting. Then I went under, and their voices disappeared. Sound became muted. I was alone. It was me and the water. I was going to save that man's kid. So, we know Kip used to be a fantastic swimmer, and we know that he stopped that. So, now we have potentially someone who's trapped on the water on this boogie board, and Kip's actually gone into the water to try to save him. We know as well that obviously the weather's a bit strange in terms of, a little bit more dangerous. We know that Kip is potentially drunk. So we have a few things, going against Kip, but we're going to see what he can do. But think about it as this idea of him trying to prove himself. So the alcohol's given him a little bit of confidence and a bit of courage to do this, okay? But we know he's more than likely trying to prove himself, not only to the man and the police, but his parents and to himself as well. There was a current. I was being pulled away from the jetty, but this was the bay. This wasn't the ocean side, I kept thinking. I should have taken my jeans off. They were so heavy. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swim. I was being swept out and away from the lights. The sea grabbed the board and flung it into the darkness. I turned on my back to do my best backstroke, but the waves broke over my head and crushed me. I rolled over and over in the water, my legs curled up to my chest. I was floating in a whirlpool. Even though I was strong, I could feel the water was a million times stronger than me. The bay had never been so wild. It was like a giant undertow. It was taking me away. I kept struggling and fighting it. I was gasping and throwing my arms up. I fought for ages, and then I didn't have it in me anymore. It was true. I'd lost the will to swim. So again, thinking of different things and different ways that people are lost. And we already know Kip is lost in his thoughts, and now he's also, lost that one thing that he could do, which is his, will to swim. He just couldn't do it anymore. This wasn't a bay. This was a massive river. It flowed so fast. I couldn't get up to the surface to take another breath. My lungs would blow up. They would burst. I was floating. The giant sea river was taking me with it. My mouth opened and the water poured into me, and I had the strangest thought. I thought, that guy, Harold Holt, the guy Ted told me about, this must have been what happened to him. All right, we move on to Annie. Inside the car, I could still smell the fish and chips. Mum drove to Point Nepean with Simon and me. The rain made it hard to see, even with the windscreen wipers on fast. Mum leaned right over the steering wheel and peered ahead, scrunching up her eyes. She asked me what happened, and then didn't listen when I told her. Then she asked me what had happened again. A police car was waiting, and they let us through the boom gate at the entrance to the national park. The policeman's raincoat glistened. Water hit it and made a pattering sound. Drive down to Gunners Park, he told Mum. He peered in at me and Simon. You're Annie? I nodded. He stood back. Okay, we'll see you in a minute. Mum parked the car next to Dad's. The policeman came over. Mum grabbed coats from the boot. Put this on, she said, handing me one. I took off my soaking wet jacket and put on the dry one. It was Dad's. It was too big. Can you show us where you both were? The policeman asked. Everyone was shouting because the weather was so loud. Another police car pulled up near the jetty. They grabbed torches and we walked on the beach toward the point. She got stuck climbing up, I shouted as we walked. Then a bit of the cliff came down and she fell. I couldn't see her. It was hard to breathe with the wind blowing in my face. I couldn't get down to her. How much of the cliff came down? I don't know. It was getting dark. Can you give us an idea? It was some sand went down with her. We reached the point. Suddenly the sky went white with lightning. It was like a strobe light. For a split second, I saw the whole landscape, like a negative photograph. The cliff looked completely different, a pile of rocks and sand with the water rushing over and around it, making new shapes, a new point. More of it has come down, I told them, as the thunder roared. They leaned forward, straining to hear. Much more has come down, I said louder. It looks like a different cliff. Call SES, call search and rescue, said the policeman, staring straight ahead. I didn't know who he was speaking to, but people behind him had their phones out. Are you sure this is the place? It wasn't further around? No, this is it. This is where I left her. Dad came running up. Mum's voice shook. She wiped her hand across her eyes. The little cliff, this cliff, was all she could say. Simon started to cry. I stood behind him, but I didn't cry. Mum was pointing. Then she dropped her arm as if it were too heavy to lift. She could be there, Andrew. Under there, under the sand. Dad put his arm around Mum. He shook his head. This could have happened after she fell. If the sand came down on her, she could have pushed further out. Pushed off. The policeman turned to us, nodding. She could be in the water. Alright, back to Kip again. Then I saw a light. Sharp silver streaks of rain hit my face. The light came down and blocked everything else. Someone was shouting. My head went under and up again. An orange metal hook came toward me. I knew what I had to do. I had to grab the hook, but my arm wouldn't work. It was numb. I couldn't feel it. Then it lifted up because the waves pushed it. I held on to the hook. and they pulled me toward a boat. Waves hit my face, my body rolled. A hand, thick and warm, grabbed at my arm. I was hauled up. I was only half aware. They took me inside the cabin and closed the door. All the noise stopped. I heard a voice say, "Nearly swept clean out of the heads." I couldn't stand up. My knees gave way. I could hardly breathe. I think I vomited up a whole lot of water. I couldn't speak. My body was shaking, not shivering, but the way a really old person will shake. The hand that I held the hook with was still gripping the air. A man pulled my jeans and jacket off. He dried me and wrapped me in a big towel and then a blanket that looked like foil. You'd think it was embarrassing having a stranger rip your clothes off, but all I remember was thinking that my legs were blue. One of the men put his face to mine. It was glistening wet. His breath was warm and smelt of mints. "Hello there. Hello." I pulled back a bit. "Hi," I managed. "What's your name?" he asked. It was a strange question, but I think he was trying to work out if I was all right. "Kip." "Well, Kip, a few minutes later and we would have had the helicopters looking out for you in Bass Strait, I reckon." I started to breathe in a funny way, almost panting, as if I might start to cry. It wasn't the police or the Coast Guard who'd picked me up. It was the pilot boat. "I'm John," said the guy who pulled me out. "You're going to be okay, Kip." He took off his beanie and pushed it down on my head, right over my ears, as if he were dressing a snowman. I nodded, feeling too weak to do anything more. "What happened?" asked the guy at the front. He was steering. It wasn't a big boat, but the engine sounded deep and strong and even. "Did you fall overboard?" "I was looking for someone," I managed to tell them. The guy looked out at the night. "Funny place to look, mate. Bloody lucky you are. We're not usually this far over. Ebb tide, southeasterly." He looked out again, shaking his head. Unbelievably lucky. In the light from the boat I could see waves, big savage waves like the surf. I closed my eyes. How long had I been in the water? Was it the middle of the night? The guy steering eased down the throttle. I found out later that his name was Gary. The boat stopped rocking so much and ploughed through the waves. I said it again. "I was looking for someone, in the water." John looked at me for a moment, then put his fingers on my wrist, taking my pulse. "You were in the water, mate, and we've got you now. You're safe." Why didn't he understand what I was trying to tell him? I went to stand up, but he stopped me. It was like a strange lurching dance we were doing. My voice got louder. I could hear the other guy talking to someone on the radio. I held onto John's arm as the boat went over a wave. "There was someone in the water. Not me. A man on the beach. He's lost his girls. I was really thirsty. I thought of the Coke and threw up again. It probably went all over that poor guy." He held my shoulders. "Listen, mate, you're in shock. The only person in the water was you." He sat me back down. "It's okay. We're going to get you home." My head rolled back. John squinted out the window. He sighed, shaking his head. He looked at his mate. "What do you reckon?" I heard him say. "There's a pilot waiting out there for us to bring him in." "I saw them," I said, trying to make them understand. "That's why I was in the water. I was swimming out to help them." Gary turned around. "You saw someone?" I nodded. They talked quietly to each other. One of them said, "Look, the kid's been drinking." I didn't have the energy to explain. I rocked on the seat. I smelt diesel. The foil blanket crinkled. "If anyone else is out there, we won't find them," said John. "It was pure luck I spotted you." "A great night for everyone to go swimming," Gary muttered. "I'll call the Lonsdale Lighthouse." "There was a board," I managed. "A purple boogie board." Gary sighed loudly. Rain hit the windows. "I can call the Coast Guard," he said. "But by that time—" He looked at me, then shook his head as if he were trying to make up his mind. I closed my eyes. I heard him say, "We'll go up as far as the first point. Then I'm turning around." The boat slowly followed the line of the coast. Each time the hull hit the waves, I felt a jolt go through me. I couldn't work out in which direction we were going, except there was a light on the headland, and I could see luminous sand when the searchlight of the front of the boat swept the coast. "Stay here," John told me. He opened the door and the storm noise filled the cabin. John held onto the side and shone a big torch on the sea. Waves leapt up, grabbing at the night. The boat kept moving through the water. John made a signal and Gary slowed down. The water went quiet, and all we could hear was the storm, the wind whipping the water and the water slapping the boat. Then I saw it. The boogie board, being tossed in and out of the torchlight. It flew right up in the air and down again. John leaned forward, peering into the rain. The boat lurched like a ride at the show. John tilted his head, frowning, holding still. And then I understood what he was trying to do. He was trying to distinguish the sounds, the wind from the rain, from the sea, from any human sounds. He was listening for sounds of life. After a few minutes, the boat moved forward again. Gary radioed the Coast Guard. "We've picked up a kid here." He frowned at me. "He seems to think there's someone else in the water." I rested my head against the spattered window and looked out. Then I heard John yell. I turned around. Gary looked up from the radio. I was dazed. I felt sick. "What?" I said. My heart was racing. "What is it?" Gary put the engine back into neutral. John yanked out a metal hook which let down a platform at the back of the boat. It went up and down like a horse at a rodeo. A shape rolled over a wave. A neon arm. My breath came shuddering, as if I was going to cry. It was terrible. A blue face, blue lips. But it wasn't a girl. It was the little boy. All right, so we're going to leave it there for today. Interesting that we now have Kip, who, although, at times we might have thought that they may not have actually been someone in the water, we now find out that it is actually the little boy. Till next time.